Here's an essential bass part that is quite simple, but carries a lot of weight. Let's take a closer look now at Jimmy Garrison's bass line on Acknowledgement from A Love Supreme. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rybicki. I'm glad that you're here and Happy New Year. I am recording this on the first day of 2025 and I hope that your new year will be great. So we are talking about Acknowledgement from A Love Supreme, the seminal, magnificent masterpiece from John Coltrane. And this bass line is simple, as I said, but carries some weight. And that weight has to do with John Coltrane's turn in his searching for becoming better musically to also connect somewhat to his spirituality. Not somewhat, connect a lot to his spirituality. This album is in fact a prayer to God, and it all has a very sort of meditative, almost trance-like quality to the whole album, and especially this piece in particular. And that to me reflects this sort of West African traditions of this sort of trance music that has to do also connected to spirituality. John Coltrane was searching all the time to be a better musician and here to connect with some greater experience, to connect with some greater sense of existence, to connect with the Godhead. It got so intense, in fact, after years towards the end of his career, as you may know, he got into some very, very aggressive sounding sounds out of him. Sort of reflected most maybe in this sort of anecdote that I heard, I think it's true, that at some point on a live gig where he's the band leader, Pharoah Sanders is also playing, they are both just screaming on the saxophones, just really wailing away. And it gets so intense at one point that John Coltrane actually takes the horn out of his mouth and starts screaming with his mouth, with his voice, to try to again reach this higher level of existence. And so this is the sort of background of the weight that comes with this particular line, which is so simple, but it represents so much. And the line itself is not difficult. It just starts on the end of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The notes are F, A flat, F, B flat. I want to make a note too that this is not how the song actually fully starts. It starts with a tremolo sort of on an E natural. It's a rubato thing, but this is the more recognized sort of part of the piece, at least for bass players. And so this line is not hard, but you want to pay attention to the articulation as much as you can. That last note is pretty short, right? Long, long, short, long. And the Fs can be sort of in between. They can be sort of a middle on the shorter end. They're not super long, but they're sort of just normal length. And you may have noticed that I may have closed my eyes when I was playing to try to sort of connect to a little bit of that meditative quality to it, and also to try to lock into what Elvin Jones is doing on the drums, which is very busy. And that's great. It's a little bit hard to find where the bass fits in there, although Jimmy Garrison does it perfectly. So you really got to listen to this to understand where it fits in the best way. Also, speaking of busyness, you might think that because it is sort of trance-like and meditative and this line repeats so often at the beginning, that it would be that repetitive throughout the bass part for the song. But if you take a look at the actual transcription, which is available below, by the way, it's actually quite busy. Jimmy Garrison's kind of all over the place, and that's great. It's awesome. It's a little bit understated. It's quite hard to hear, actually. His actual sound has a lot of low end. And so there's some question marks in the transcription that I put in some question marks. Like, I'm not really sure what he's playing here. It's quite hard to hear from the mix that exists and so on and so forth. But I think that the depth and the thickness of what he's doing speaks well to this kind of moment, this kind of meaning to this particular song. So because this little riff, so to speak, this little cell of a bass line is so simple, although it is serious, it can also add a sense of sort of, I don't know, fun in a way that you can throw it into a solo and play with the sort of key center, so to speak, and sort of throw it around, and people will recognize it as being from A Love Supreme. You can go. something to that effect. Just however you want to play around with it, you're sort of taking that little recognizable cell and sort of shifting it around. Oftentimes with something like that, if you're going to try to quote this little snippet of something, you want to actually repeat it a couple times, which I didn't do necessarily here. So if we're in the middle of a solo, let people hear it, and then something to that effect. Basically, the idea is that you are allowing people, you're bringing people into this idea and allowing them to sort of have a moment of recognition, and then you sort of manipulate it. So, as I say, it is not a difficult line, but it is difficult to play, I think, well and accurately. Is partially why this isn't really called a jam sessions. You know, the meaning behind it and the import of it. And I think also, like, it's so special, it's hard to think of it as a sort of vehicle for other kind of improvisation. It's John Coltrane's thing. Nonetheless, it's an important line that we should know, we should be familiar with, and so I encourage you to learn it. It certainly won't be hard. That's it for the simple line for today. Once again, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining me today. Look for those links below for some PDFs, and remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.